All right, it looks like we are live on social media and the webinar has started. Welcome everyone to our 1 p.m. webinar, Therapeutic Approaches to Supporting Survivors of Childhood Sexual Abuse, Sexual Violence. We're going to get started with a land acknowledgement first, and then I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Stuart, who is co-hosting this webinar with me today. We acknowledge that the land that we are meeting on is the traditional territory of the many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and that is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Thank you everyone for being here. If you're joining us here live on the webinar, you're able to post comments and chat in that way. And we encourage that. If you have any questions, comments for our presenters today, please do post in the chat. We'll try to respond to them as best as we can. And also, if you're watching us from Facebook, you can also post comments and questions there on our Gatehouse page, the Gatehouse Child Abuse Investigation and Support site. I know it's a long title, but that is our legal name. I'm going to pass it on to Stuart, who's going to introduce our two wonderful speakers today. Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you, Maria. And I'm only too honored to have you two here today. We have Sherri Jackson and we have Rob Hawkings here today. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just kind of, rather than introduce you, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, would probably be better. So I'm going to go with Sherri first. And when Sherri's done, I'm going to let Rob do the same thing. And then I'm going to jump right back into Sheri. And Sheri is going to talk about therapeutic approaches from her point of view or perspective. So welcome, Sheri. Oh, you're muted. Sheri, you're muted.
There we go. I do. My clients do that with me all the time. Unmute yourself. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's good to see you again, Stuart, and welcome, Rob. Good to see you too. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Sherri Jackson. I'm a certified addiction counselor level 2, and I also hold certificates in CBT as well. I have my own private practice, but I'm also working at Addiction Rehab Toronto in their new virtual intensive outpatient program. And I'm very excited to be doing this work, and I'm glad to be on such an esteemed panel with Rob.
Oops, thank you, Sheri. And now I'm going to pass this over to Rob, and please, a brief introduction, and then I'm going to bring it right back to Sheri.
Great, thank you, Stuart. So good to reconnect with all three of you, and good to be back at this conference. Been to several of these before, presented at one or two. I'm a registered psychotherapist in private practice in Mississauga, not far from the Gatehouse, and I'm semi-retired. I'm cutting down the number of private clients I work with and doing more training, consulting, and clinical supervision. And program development and things like that, which I love doing. I love doing that kind of work. What can I say? I've been working in the field of trauma recovery. I love this phrase, trauma transformation, since the late 1980s, long time now. And early 1990s, I was involved with the Gatehouse, so I've maintained that connection. Very, very, very good organization. And I'm not going to say more than that because more of that will come out when I do my presentation. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Stuart and Sheri.
Thank you, Rob. And back to you, Sheri.
Thank you so much. Again, pleasure to be here. Again, my name's Sherri Jackson, and I've been in addictions for quite a while now. On a personal note, just to let you know, I've been sober for 11 years now. I got sober through the 12-step model of recovery, which certainly when I walked in there, I was beaten, I was hopeless. I didn't think that anybody understood my story. I grew up in an alcoholic home. I was physically abandoned by my parents due to my mother's hospitalization. Later on, I was molested by an uncle. I had my first drink at the age of 13, and I didn't realize I was a budding alcoholic already. And that was to cope with the trauma that had previously happened to me. I couldn't verbalize it. I couldn't express the feelings. I just expressed myself as being dirty in places that soap doesn't reach. That's the verbiage that I would put to it today. I went through a series of extremely toxic relationships, again, just thinking I was crazy and I don't understand why I can't make this thing called life work. I'm not making solid connections. I always say the biggest lie I ever told myself in my adult years were I'm fine and I don't care. That childhood stuff doesn't matter anymore. It was a long time ago. That couldn't have been any further from the truth. I was the kind of girl, and I thought once I get, you know, the white picket fence, the house, the car, the 2.5 kids and the career, then I'm going to be okay. And I got all of these things, and I couldn't understand why I'm still suffering severe depression, that I'm medicating with alcohol. I'm suffering anxiety. And again, I have no words, no vocabulary to put to it. I just know I'm comparing my insides to everybody else's outsides, and I'm just not measuring up. So transforming trauma for me was putting meaning to all of those experiences that I had. And many of us do go into counseling, seeking answers and finding out, you know, the ways to be able to cope. So I'm very blessed now that I'm able to carry my lived experience as well as my education to be able to help others. And I'm a girl that loves a good quote. And for me, Gabor Mate said, it's impossible to understand addiction without asking what relief the addict finds or hopes to find in the drug or addictive behavior. The attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. So we need to ask not why the addiction, but why the pain. And that quote, if I had known that at a younger age, probably would have changed my life. I didn't realize that I was in that kind of pain, and especially being a childhood sexual abuse survivor. So underneath that iceberg of addiction, as I was saying, are anxiety, depression, shame, guilt, abuse, and stress. And a lot of people ask me, you know, why is it that with addicts that they'll have such severe consequences to their addictions and they know what's coming and they still can't stop? Because shame is a lot heavier than the consequence of the addictive behavior. So it's about getting to the root causes underneath, and each client's story is different. But when I've been around, like I say, in the recovery circles for 11 years, and there are so many childhood sexual abuse survivors among us. And it's about getting down to, you know, a lot of that childhood trauma that is related to addiction. So the first thing as an addiction counselor that I find the most challenging for me is to break through the denial of addiction, because the addictive mind has a different conversation than the sound mind. So getting to those different types of addiction, and addiction has a very self-serving bias, and a lot of the thoughts, and I just want to connect with the people that are out there who might be addicts. Some of the cognitive distortions that a therapist would call, or what we have to break through. So some of the ones that I identified with are, I'm not that bad, I'm not hurting anybody. That was a very distorted way to think, because for me, I would drink in isolation. And I thought, well, I'm not hurting my daughter, she's not home, because she would be with her dad. But I also was a blackout binger, and I used to drink in the bathtub, and she very well could have come home and found me not alive. So that was the reality. But that's how heavy in denial I was. I'm not hurting anybody because she's not home. Also for people with addiction to gambling, you can say, oh, well, that was just a run of bad luck. That's often a fallacy when it comes to gambling. So the minimizing as well. And this was one I said to myself, I drink a lot less than most people. Okay, but when I challenged that fallacy, I drank a lot less than most people I surrounded myself with. So again, the alcoholic life becomes the only life I know, because I don't want to surround myself with people who might question me on my addiction. I want to surround myself with people who are well aware and who drink the way that I do. So that way I won't have to challenge my own thoughts about it and my own, deep-seated denial. A lot of the other ones, again, if you can identify with this statement, well, at least I'm not like them. This was another one for me. I still have a job, lots of friends. I've never gotten into any trouble with the law. It's not a big deal. I don't do it every day. That was mine. I was a blackout binger, so that was definitely one of mine. It's only a couple of nights a week. I can go for one, why not? So again, breaking through all of that. There's another cognitive distortion they call optimism bias, and it consists of the unrealistic belief that things are gonna work out, Oh, even though I couldn't function today and get everything done, I'll be able to do that tomorrow. It's okay. I only lost one day, I'll just go to the bar and not drink. That was a fallacy that I never successfully did that. There's a saying in recovery community, it says, if you hang around the barbershop long enough, eventually you'll get a haircut. So again, staying away from the bars, again, for the gamblers, this machine, it's going to pay out huge. I've been sitting here for hours. This is the one that's going to pay out. So again, a lot of people drink to avoid things. So avoidance coping is another one. Many persons or many people say, I drink to quiet my mind. I just need to relax. Mine was, I'm a single mother. I've had a hard day. I deserve a drink. And what I've come to know, if I put deserve and drink in the same sentence, that is twisted thinking. That is a cognitive distortion for me. So again, looking and being aware of all of those patterns. And of course, trauma. I mean, that was the biggest one for me, right? I have PTSD. I deserve a drink. That was one that I said, that labeling. I was happy when I was labeled with childhood PTSD from trauma, because that was a great excuse for me to drink over. Again, I was abused as a child. If you had my life, you'd drink the way that I drink too. So there was a lot of those cognitive distortions. I drank and used a lot out of boredom. I didn't have a purpose in life. I didn't feel that I had purpose. Again, guilt is I've done something bad, but shame is I am something bad. Again, I feel dirty in places that soap doesn't reach. So again, boredom was a huge thing. There's nothing else to do. Oh, I may as well drink. Oh, I'll drink while I do housework. Again, those were a lot of mine. Control fallacies is another cognitive distortion where you overestimate or underestimate the level of control that this stuff has over you. Tell me if anyone relates to this one. I can stop whenever I want. Yeah, tried that off and on for 4 decades. I can do it on my own. That was another very big distortion. I tried on my own for 4 decades. I could not do it until I entered the recovery community and started getting those supports. My father was an alcoholic. That was another one. And my grandfather, it's genetic. I'm doomed anyway. So one of my mottos when I was a kid, live fast, die young, and leave a good looking corpse. I tried my best to do that. Thank God I wasn't successful, but that was the kind of stuff I used to say to myself when I was young. There's another distortion. It's called mental filtering. It's a cognitive distortion that occurs when you selectively focus on certain positives or negatives of an event. So tell me if anyone relates to these. Helps me stay focused until I can get some things done. I can't think straight without it. I can still work. That was another one. So there's lots of fallacies. So again, as a counselor, it's my job to break through the denial, which is very strong when it comes to the addictive mind. Another fallacy is normalizing, right? Everybody's doing it. Well, everybody I hung out with was doing it for sure, but apparently lots of people can have social drinks, but I just didn't choose to hang out with those people. Again, who doesn't drink? If here's another fallacy, if alcohol was really bad, it wouldn't be legal. Now that marijuana is legal, I hear that often. So that's another one, breaking through. I needed to relax. I see a lot of people in my field, they substitute. It's like, okay, well, I had a problem with alcohol, but now they're substituting marijuana. It's like, okay, what's your motive behind it? Let's get down to the causes and conditions. So again, there's so many distortions that, you need to break through. So that's my role as an addiction counselor. Certainly blaming others is another distortion. I would blame others. Again, you would drink the way that I drink too if you did this, this, and this. So we can all substitute in our own, kind of denials if you are an addict. And as a counselor, we always go through, a lot of people will understand the changes of stage model, which is how we evaluate addiction. So in the pre-contemplation stage, you're not considering, or you're unwilling, unable to change. So it's about moving people through the stages of change to get them into the contemplation. Like, you might see the possibility of change, but you're still a bit ambivalent. So again, moving through those. And when I first came in, it was, definite, there was pre-contemplation, but I had no desire to change. The consequences weren't bad enough. So again, it's moving through, and again, trying to get people to move through those stages of change. And taking the action step is usually when they end up with an addiction counselor, when they're ready and contemplating. So that's when we get to break through some of that denial. How did I stay sober? A lot of people ask me that with my lived experience, and you'll hear it all the time in the recovery community. I stayed sober one day at a time. That's how I got 11 years, one day at a time. And I have a sponsor. I do work an active program in recovery. I'm accountable to my sponsor. We've built a relationship of trust and honesty. I always say friends are the family you choose. Oftentimes we have families that are too toxic to go to or not supportive. A lot of people in my circle lacked empathy. They'd say, why don't you only have one or two? And I'm like, do you think I never thought of that? Of course, anybody that's had a problem with substance abuse, that's all they think about is, why can't I be normal? Why can't I just drink like other people? So that was how I stayed sober, was one day at a time. I think another thing that we talk about in addiction is identifying my triggers. I needed to really look into the things that trigger me, and there's different types of triggers. There's emotional states that can be triggers, people, places, things, thoughts, situations. So if I just give some examples, like for me, an emotional state in early recovery, I kind of say I had three feelings. I had anger, happy, and sad. Those were the only three feelings that I could label and identify over. So I drank a lot over deep, deep resentments. I hadn't forgiven my uncle, my father. So there was a forgiveness process to that came a lot later in recovery. But I often say resentments are emotional hangovers. And they are just as real as a hangover that's caused from alcohol. So I needed to look at those things. So getting sober is a lot more than just putting the substance down. That's when it got real for me, because all of a sudden, all of those emotions came up. I call myself like a shaken up pop bottle. And I'm thinking this, I'm sober now. Life should be better. I've put down this substance. But that's when all the old stuff starts to come up to the surface. So it's important to identify those triggers and establish social supports. Look at the places that are triggering for you. Is it the local bar? Is it for me, it was Rogers Center, nothing greater than having Sky Dome open at the time and lining up the beverages. Looking at the things that I need to stay away from. Wine glasses, huge trigger for me. I could tell people, you know what, I'm only having one glass of wine. Check out this cognitive distortion. Do you want to know how big my glass was? It was huge, but I'm only having one. Fit a whole wine bottle in that. What are some of the thoughts that I'm having that are triggering? I'm a loser. I'm dirty. Nobody loves me. Looking at those triggering thoughts. Activities and situations for me are definitely patios. In the summer was a huge trigger for me. Warm weather. I would sit on the patio and drink and judge people. One of my favorite pastimes when I was in my active addiction. So again, it's so important to identify those and some of the tools. I build a toolbox for sobriety, and I think it's so important to have tools in there. And again, getting a sponsor, huge. That's if you're going to go the recovery community. There's lots of other, it doesn't have to be necessarily 12-step recovery. There's smart recovery. There's all kinds of different programs. Of course, treatment centers, addiction counselors. There are so many avenues today that are open. Like I say, I got sober in the 12-step recovery. I still am very active and involved in the community. So that's one for me, but I understand that that doesn't work for everybody. So there's lots of avenues to pursue. Some of the other things in my toolbox are breathing exercises such as 4-7-8 breathing, meditations. There's lots of free guided meditations online. I need to still my mind. I need to quiet myself because it's very active in there. My sponsor had a saying, she said, don't go to the neighborhood alone. So she would make me pick up the phone and call her and be accountable to let her know what was going on inside. Of course, getting therapy, hugely helpful for me. Again, tracing those childhood roots to the things that, you know, I don't care. How did they affect me? Looking at attachment issues, looking at the way I was raised and what I like to call coping skills. I was a big people pleaser at the time. It was a survival skill that I needed. It calmed my chaotic alcoholic home when I was in fear, because if I could just be the good girl, then everything else is going to be okay. But in my adult years, people pleasing isn't serving me well. I'm not living my authentic truth because I'm pleasing everybody and I have no idea who I am. So the journey of sobriety for the last 11 years is finding out who I am. And that's been huge. And again, finding places like the Gatehouse has just been that little oasis, that little place where I could find my voice and be myself. And it's such an honor to be part of such a wonderful, wonderful place. I cannot say enough wonderful things about the Gatehouse. I'm going to get emotional here. Therapy, of course, right? Connecting with a good therapist that, you know, like Rob here, because I can't wait to hear Rob's story. You know, he has a fabulous story as well. And anybody who volunteers and spends time at the Gatehouse certainly has my admiration. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Rob. Getting connected into the recovery community has been huge for me, making myself accountable. When I sponsor somebody, I say, call me every day. And they say, but I'm good today, I'm fine. And I said, if you won't call me when you're good, you're never going to call me when you're not good. I want you to get used to reaching out, because I had to challenge a lot of old belief systems I had. And one of the old belief systems that I have is I'm not worthy of asking for help. So I had to challenge that belief system and say, you know what, it's okay for me to pick up the phone and to tell somebody in an honest way where I'm at in my recovery, because my life depends on it. I will pick up a drink if I don't start becoming accountable. So again, lots of other strategies for my toolbox. I'll go through a couple of them. I have one here. I don't know if everybody can see, but I like to make a physical toolbox that I have. So I have some recovery sayings on here. This is sort of my, in case of emergency or in case I want to drink or use, flip this top open. So I know this is a good one I keep in here, my score bars. So oftentimes there's some cravings when you're early in sobriety, but I definitely have some things in there. So my sponsor's phone number, other members of the community, the Calm app, sober apps on my phone. I have a list of funny videos I need to watch in case I need to shift my emotional state. A gratitude journal, very important. So definitely things there. I always get people to write on little recipe cards or cue cards, all of those things. Put pictures of the people you love. My daughter's face was constantly with me at all times in early sobriety because I wanted to break that cycle. I wanted to break the cycle of trauma and addiction. So that's a huge one. Having a 7-day recovery plan. I needed to know what I was doing every hour of every day. So if I'm spending 8 hours of work, what meetings, what am I doing after? Who am I connecting with? Who am I calling? That way, if I'm in a panic or a craving, I'm going to go, okay, it's Tuesday, 4 o'clock. Oh, I should be calling my sponsor right now. Staying away from risky situations is another one. Having supports in place if I do need to go to a situation. I had somebody I know who just went to a wedding. They had a safety plan in place. They had a reason to be there. It was their sister's wedding, but they called their sponsor before they went in. They had their sponsor on speed dial through the whole time. Knowing my triggers is important. You know, again, removing all of the substance from my environment, hugely important. boundaries. I'm sure Rob's nodding. We'll probably be talking somewhat about boundaries too. Certainly important things in the recovery process. I needed to learn how to say the word no because it wasn't in my vocabulary. I had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that was a huge challenge for me. So again, building social supports was huge for me. And I could go on and on, but I see I've talked longer than I ever thought I would. Imagine, Maria, I told you that I didn't think I'd be able to fill the entire time. So, and here I am. But just in closing, I think in order to achieve long-term sobriety, or what I like to call emotional sobriety, we must create meaning and purpose in our lives. And me volunteering and being part of the Gatehouse has given me meaning and purpose. And I get goosebumps talking about this place. I just love everything that it stands for. And as a child, I was told to be seen and not heard. And a place like the Gatehouse will give you a voice and will give you a place to feel safe and secure and know that you are not alone, because the words "me too" mean a lot to people like us. And I am so grateful. So I'm thanking you so much from the bottom of my heart for this opportunity to speak. And I'm always grateful to shout from the rooftops what the Gatehouse means to me. So thank you.
Thank you, Sheri. And at the end here, hopefully we have a little bit of time for Q&A, but thank you ever so much. Now, Rob.
Thank you, Stuart. So welcome, everyone. This, believe it or not, is my very first webinar experience, presenting at a webinar. I've done a lot of work, especially since the pandemic began, on Zoom, using Zoom rooms where I can at least scroll through the thumbnails of everyone who's attending. So I have no idea how many people are watching this, participating, listening, and what kind of people. So I'm going really by some past experiences with this conference in person. Many of them have been held at the, what is it, Maria, the Police Training College, not far from the Gatehouse, where my experience was, and I know Stuart can back me up on this. There's a real mix, there has been a real mix of professionals, people from law enforcement, and survivors and their friends and family. So I'm going to try and address what I say to all of those people. And the first thing I want to do is follow up on the example, the power of example that Sheri has presented in being fairly open and transparent about my own status as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and as a recovering addict and alcoholic. So thank you, Sheri. It takes a lot of courage and integrity to do that, and to do it in a boundaried way that is helpful to those listening and those you're working with those I'm working with as a professional. I'm proud to say, and Sheri's story prompted me to just do a little math in my head, that this coming October 7th will be my 34th anniversary of sobriety from alcohol. That was the day I made the decision to not pick up another drink with the help of AA. And a number of other addictions. One of my specialties, as you'll see from my bio, those of you who have read it, is working with sex and love addiction survivors, people in sex and love addiction recovery. I'm in recovery from that as well. It's drawing on that background that I just want to add another tool to, I love that toolkit that Sheri showed us. And you may have seen me hold up a little cross symbol, the silver cross we use to ward off evil or vampires, because the score bar thing is a risk zone for me. And there's a tool, there's a few things I need to totally abstain from, alcohol being one of them, but there are a whole bunch of other things that I can get a little out of balance. I can start to rely on a little too much And one of those is sugar and sweets and baked goods and stuff like that. So score bars, I can allow myself a little bit of controlled indulgence in that, but I need to track that. And if it starts to get out of hand, then I'm using that to self-medicate. And that's not a good thing, because it's a short step from that to picking up a drink again or indulging in other addictions. And the particular tool I want to add is something I learned from a gentleman named Patrick Carnes, who is one of the grandfathers, one of the leaders of in developing treatment for sex addiction. And it's a little tool he calls the recovery zone, or he calls it the personal craziness index, with due apologies about the use of that term crazy, which is very disrespectful to those who live with mental illness or mental handicaps. I disclose my status as a survivor when I think it's appropriate, for two reasons. One, if I'm working with a client, to let them know they're not alone, and that has such a huge value. It's of such help to survivors, and that's one of the big premises of the Gatehouse and Art Lockhart's vision in founding the Gatehouse way back when, to bring people together to learn, to experience that they're not alone, and to help each other. And Sheri and I know full well how powerful a thing that is in the context of 12-step fellowships and groups. So the other reason I'll share that with people is to reassure them that recovery is possible. Recovery is a work in progress. It's a lifelong journey for me. I can say at this point that I hope to be on that journey for the duration of my life. I see it as a blessing now, but that's very hard for someone early in recovery who sees it only as a burden, as that weight of core shame that Sheri talked about. So to hear from someone that that can be worked through and moved beyond, to the point where I, for one, I'm grateful to say, can look on the wounds of that childhood abuse as sacred wounds that have been a gift to me, that have allowed me in the course of recovery to look deeper into myself and to enjoy some spiritual awakening and to heal myself at some deeper levels than most people are given the opportunity to do. So I want to talk about 4 different things today, and kind of weave them all together to give you an idea of some of the learnings that have come to me, primarily through the years, just about 2 years now, is it, of the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been a huge challenge to me, to my fellow professionals, and to all trauma survivors. And it needs to be talked about. Like abuse itself, it needs to be talked about. So the 4 things are, number 1, mindfulness. Number 2, positive psychology. I'm going to be saying more about each of these things through the talk. 3 is complex PTSD, or complex trauma. And the 4th is intersectionality. They're all hugely important. And I personally and professionally have had huge learnings about those through the challenges of the pandemic. I'm going to talk, I'm going to loop back to mindfulness and talk first and foremost about the mindfulness I have had to develop as a psychotherapist through this pandemic. And one of the most important things I've had to learn, and it's been a hard learning for me, is the importance of self-care. I'm by nature very compassionate, very empathetic. That has its roots way in my childhood. It was one of the ways I survived was by being overly mindful and feeling responsible for the feelings of my parents. My father was an alcoholic, his father before him. I was sexually abused by my father and his father, and others. But one of the ways I got some sense of worth and value was by my codependent mother latching on to me at the age of 10 and 11 years old as her little personal therapist. And never mind my needs were totally secondary, both to her and to me. My job was to help her with her feelings and to feel good about herself. So I've had to learn to refocus that mindfulness onto myself, first and foremost. If I'm not taking care of myself, I cannot be that power of example to my clients or to anybody else. And my ability to bring the best of everything I have, all of my skills, strengths, and experience to my clients is impaired if I'm not taking care of myself. And it's been so tempting and so easy to slip back into sacrificing myself, ignoring my own needs in the service of my clients during this pandemic. So, and their needs have been huge. I'm going to talk about that in a moment too. But I'm one of the ways that has come home to roost for me is that I've developed first a heel injury. I bruised a heel. I was walking every day for cardiovascular fitness and just to get out in the outdoors. It was really good for me. But I changed shoes to the wrong kind of shoe. I bruised a heel, which meant I couldn't walk anymore. My gait, my walking gait got impaired. And then I threw out a hip, the opposite hip, my right hip, which I'm still recovering from. So one of the things I've had to learn is that I cannot sit for the hours on end that most of us, many of us, have had to do. We've had to sit for hours and hours and hours at a computer. Not good. And it hit me. It has injured me. So I got myself just a month ago a standing desk that I can put on my desktop and raise like this so I can stand up every once in a while. So I'm going to be doing that every so often as I'm talking with you. And it's such a help. I can move my body around, stretch out my hips, get things flowing and moving again in my body. So that's just one example of the self-care that I've had to relearn through this pandemic. I want to talk now about positive psychology. Positive psychology is a new field of psychology, relatively new. It's been around for probably a decade or more now. But I've only learned about it in the past decade or so. But what it's about basically is learning to do some very basic things to help deal with, for example, the cognitive distortions that Sheri talked about, and learning to think learning to feel self-worth by talking to myself in a positive way, internalizing, rewiring my own brain so that more and more of my self-talk, my thoughts, are positive affirmations about myself, rather than the shame-based negative judgments that have been programmed, that were programmed into me from a very young age, growing up in a dysfunctional home, an alcoholic home where abuse was going on. I want to talk about a wonderful resource in positive psychology. And I will send, Maria, I will send you a list of some of the resources I'm going to mention so that you can send it out to certainly the people who are participating in this webinar and possibly others as well. But the website is, it's a commercial website. This fellow is doing it to make money, as I do as a professional who charges a fee for my services. But he's very good with it, very generous. His name is Steph Fontaine Pennock, and he was a student of some of the founders of the positive psychology movement. His website is positivepsychology.com. And one of the most valuable tools, what he does is to promote his materials and resources, which he sells. He'll often send out an email with a list of free resources to get people interested. And I've used those to great benefit with my clients and myself. One of them is about dealing with cognitive distortions. It's called a dysfunctional thought record. It's a worksheet. Sheri, you may have worked with that or something similar. I certainly did during the years I was at Bellwood Health Services. And Sheri and I, by the way, share some, I'm sure, some common colleagues and acquaintances through Bellwood. Sheri worked with Bellwood for a time after I left there. So I will send that link to Maria, and I encourage anyone who wishes to go there and get on Steph Pennock's mailing list. There's some good material he sends out. But I want to tell you a little story about an experience I had with another very esteemed, respected teacher in positive psychology, who's also interested in psychodrama, a field that I also work in. He did a presentation at a workshop a number of years ago in which he showed a video, a film video, nobody uses film anymore, of some work he and some colleagues did at an inpatient hospital setting for people with psychiatric illnesses, in which they were doing research on this, pre and post-treatment measures to support the effectiveness of these techniques. And they're so simple, it seems absurd really, but it's so important. What they did is whenever someone in the group, it was a group setting, whenever someone in the group used a positive psychology skill, like grounding themselves or listening respectfully to someone else in the group, or asking open-ended questions to get more information so that they didn't get triggered off into some distorted thinking and feelings, they would get complimented on that by the group leaders. It would be pointed out to that person and to everyone in the group, and they would get lots of praise and reinforcement for that. And that is what, and that connects now to my next topic, complex PTSD. Complex PTSD, in a nutshell, is the kind of PTSD that often has its roots in very, very early trauma and neglect that goes way beyond sexual abuse or physical abuse alone. It has a lot to do with parental emotional abuse, emotional neglect, emotional unavailability, or just out and out lack of parenting skills by the parents, by the absence of healthy substitute parents in a child's life. There are many ways. Being a victim of other forms of harm or prejudice or discrimination, having to do with skin color or ethnic identity or nationality. All of these give rise to this thing we call complex PTSD. And one of the things that has made this pandemic so challenging and difficult for people, and there are many with complex PTSD, is that we have not been able to meet in person. And it's a general principle of working with trauma survivors that these wounds are interpersonal wounds. They are wounds inflicted by other people who are, we treat each other with kindness, with compassion, with respect, with nurturing and guidance in the case of children. And those wounds need to be healed in interaction with other people. They need to be healed interpersonally. That has not been possible during this pandemic, except through things like telephone and video contact like Zoom. And it's better than nothing. And thanks be to God and Creator for Zoom. Where would we be without it at this stage? But for those with those early childhood wounds, it is not enough. And I have several clients with rather severe complex PTSD who have really, really struggled through this pandemic and who have said to me, when can I start coming back to see you in person? Or this Zoom stuff is not working for me. Many of them would rather talk by telephone than by Zoom, because telephone is at least something they're familiar with from the before times, right before the pandemic. And it doesn't hurt so much to them to see the picture, but not to be in direct personal contact with their therapist or with anyone. So this has been, it's dawned on me over the past couple of years, that this has been hard on me too, as a therapist. And I've never been formally diagnosed with it, but I probably have complex PTSD myself. I suffered many of those same things very early in my own life. So I've had to really work hard to maintain my connections over Zoom with colleagues and friends. I'm very blessed, thanks to my own recovery and the help and support of so many people, including those at the Gatehouse, including Art Lockhart, who have become good friends and colleagues of mine with whom I've been able to stay connected through this pandemic. So again, taking care of myself has been necessary in order to help my clients. And there's, by the way, for those of you who are professionals, there's a book that is a really valuable resource. I'll send this reference to you, Maria. I don't know if people are seeing this in mirror image or not, but you're seeing, I see a thumbs up from Stuart. So it's called Complex Trauma, Treatment of Complex Trauma by a very wonderful and well-respected therapist and researcher and writer named Christine Courtois. I learned a great deal. I use it as often as a reference in working with complex PTSD. I want to move now to intersectionality. I spoke about some of the early childhood wounds that can contribute to complex PTSD: race, ethnicity, national identity. I want to tell you now a little anecdote. I've had the privilege and the honor of working with some groups which are relatively diverse in terms of ethnic origin, national identity, skin color, BIPOC people, First Nations people, LGBTQ people, and all of those aspects of people's identity are hugely, hugely important, especially if they are visible to other people and result in discrimination, prejudice, or harm, or impeded access to the resources that those of us with more privilege have access to. So what I have learned over the years, but especially during this pandemic, is the importance of acknowledging those other dimensions of wounding and harm and discrimination that people have suffered. I've worked with, I want to tell you a little story here about a good friend and colleague of mine, his name is Elder Little Brown Bear, who has recently retired as Director of Aboriginal Education Programs and Culture in the Aboriginal Healing Program at Michael Garron Hospital. Wonderful man who's done such amazing and valuable work in the urban Native community here in the Greater Toronto area. But I was part of a team doing a training at Anatig Healing Lodge up in Victoria Harbour, not far from Barrie and Aurelia. Elder Little Brown Bear was one of the participants in that training. And he and I talked because our connection goes back way earlier than that to Bellwood Health Services, where he and I were colleagues way back when, long before his involvement with Michael Garron Hospital. And at that time at Anatig Healing Lodge, we talked because we both were very interested and involved in working with adult male sexual abuse survivors, of whom there are huge numbers, not only in the general population, but among Native men. And Elder Little Brown Bear told me the story about one of the first groups he did with Native men, including some very young men with histories of childhood sexual abuse. It was at Anatig Healing Lodge, and he could not get them to talk about it. It's difficult to talk about for any survivor, especially any male survivor, because we are so locked into the man box where it's not okay to have feelings. It's not okay to talk about these things. It's not okay to talk about anything that indicates that we might be victims or might have been wounded. We're supposed to be strong and tough and no fear, no tears, all of that. Stuart's nodding. He knows this is all garbage that we need to get rid of and learn how to be emotionally intelligent human beings, how to be sensitive, how to be compassionate, how to recognize our emotional feelings and express them and talk about them. So these young Native men in this group of Elder Little Brown Bears could not talk about this stuff. Session after session, group session after group session, and he was getting nothing from them about this. But he kept coming back, and they kept coming back And eventually he found a way to relate to them. And it was to do with their identity as Native men, with their culture that had been stolen from them through generations of residential school and the 60s scoop and all of that stuff. It's a horrendous history. What he did was he converted it into a drumming circle, and he got them learning to drum. And they joined that, and through that began to do what I call metabolizing their own trauma, finding a way to let it out, to move their bodies in a way that helped them feel good about who they are. So that's just one example of how crucially important it is to acknowledge and honor all of the other ways in which abuse survivors have been harmed and discriminated against. Recently, some groups and workshops I've been involved with where there have been people of color, African Canadians, for example. My colleagues and I have learned to work very hard to make our groups and workshops safe for people. And I was so gratified that some of these people, even though they were in the minority in the group, felt safe enough to talk about ways that their experience had been so different from those of us who are Caucasian, white-skinned, of European extraction. So that is important. So in conclusion, I am very, very grateful for my own healing journey, for all those who have helped me, and in particular for my own learnings through this pandemic. I know I work with a number of agencies north of the GTA, consulting with them, helping them develop programs for male survivors. And I know that they're working towards a hybrid model, and I'm sure the Gatehouse is too, where we're going to continue using Zoom because it allows us to reach so many more people over a broader geographic area so much more affordably. And we're also going to welcome being able to get together in person. So with that, I'm going to close and turn it back to Stuart and Maria. Thank you so much for attending.
You're welcome. It's been a great honor to have you both here today. Maria, do we have a couple of minutes for Q&A? Anybody have any questions? Now's your chance. Okay, well, in the interim, Rob, I'll ask you a question. You know, I love what you said about the outreach and about Zoom and how things have changed drastically because of the pandemic, and even the Gatehouse, for example. Now we're all across Canada, right? And it's all because of Zoom. And the key thing you said there about this is it's so affordable to do it this way, because before, I mean, we couldn't have done this by Skype or anything like that because it just wasn't cost effective. And the internet's gotten better, although it's far cry from being perfect in this country, considering how large we are. And but anyway, my question to you is, how do you see this moving into the future? Like, do you see this growing more exponentially? I kind of think it does, but I'm curious what your thoughts are in regards to that. I mean, especially in the outreaching communities, because I know I'm dealing with one, I'll just, now obviously I can't say the name, but I'm dealing with one person up in Whitefish Falls, for example. Yep. And that's really remote, right? And we have a lot further to go, but so what do you think to my question?
I'm so glad you asked that. I'm gonna, by way of answering that, I'm gonna give you the example of, there's a network of professionals, all of whom work with male sexual abuse survivors up in the Muskoka area, called the Muskoka Male Survivor Network. And we work in close affiliation with a local sexual assault center called the Muskoka Perry Sound Sexual Assault Center. Wonderful people. And together we have developed a model for doing therapist-led therapy groups online using Zoom for adult male abuse survivors. And because we are using Zoom, they have extended their outreach to basically all over Ontario. They're no longer are they confined to their own catchment area. They're getting support from this from their board of directors, and they're getting funding support for it. And that is, I'm seeing that, I'm experiencing because I'm working with them. This is happening with more and more agencies throughout Ontario, particularly in the north. And I did a training with Muskoka Perry Sound Sexual Assault Center and another one for Thunder Bay Counseling Center, specifically in doing these kinds of therapy groups online using Zoom, because it can reach so many people in remote communities as long as they have good internet, which is a challenge for some people, but it's spreading. You know, one cost barrier was suitable devices like iPads or computers or even phones. And the Muskoka Perry Sound Sexual Assault Center got some funding to buy a supply of iPads that they could provide free of charge to the people who wanted to participate in these groups. And that's, relatively speaking, a small cost. So it's growing, Stuart. There's more and more use of the internet and platforms like Zoom to reach further and further afield, people who wouldn't have been able to access these kinds of services otherwise.
Yeah, thank you. And you know, I really see this growing exponentially over the years, moving forward. And I'm really looking forward that we can actually do this and help people that have been excluded from this for forever, it seems like. So we're looking forward. So I'm kind of going to redirect the question now to Sheri, because even with what Sheri does in addictions, even with CSA included, that must have really this really must affected you as well in regards to your providing service, not just in the GTA, but abroad. Has that been the same effect for you then, Sheri, as well?
Yes, absolutely. And where I am at now, we just launched a few months ago a virtual intensive outpatient program, and we're reaching people up in rural areas, you know, and they're staying sober and connecting in with Zoom. And, you know, it's just been amazing as far as the equality. I mean, that's what we need to do, is make it equitable and accessible to everybody. You know, sometimes I know a lot of people in the recovery community in northern towns such as Sudbury, but oftentimes they don't have the connectivity or their, you know, the accessibility as much. So when they connect up with virtual intensive programs for therapy, as well as getting connected with the recovery community, it's opened so many doors. And I know people in my circles, I often refer clients to the Gatehouse to unpack that. I mean, there is a delicacy of making sure that you've got enough sobriety behind you before you start unpacking trauma. You want to make sure you've got that good baseline. But, you know, I had people in other countries, and I'm calling Maria going, hey, I've got somebody, you know, in Jamaica. And she's like, not there yet, but really hoping that we can expand this, because it's, you know, the demand for it, unfortunately, is so great. There's so many of us that making it accessible to people all over is just opening up huge doors. Absolutely.
You know,
Stuart,
thank you for both. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
Stuart, I don't know how much time we have left, but I'd like to respond to a couple of questions from Sabra.
I was just going to get to that.
Yeah,
thank
great.
you. Go ahead.
Sabra, thank you for asking those questions. I'd like to respond to them. Yeah. How do clients respond to my awareness and openness about their additional challenges because of who they are, and about intersectionality? They respond in a word, in a couple of words. They respond warily, but with well, and courageously, warily and courageously. And let me explain what I mean by that. I have been fortunate enough to make some really good personal connections with colleagues over the years, Little Brown Bear being an example, and some others through the through the Center for Psychodrama and Sociometry of Ontario, who are racialized, who are First Nations, who are Métis. And by collaborating with them in putting on some of these trainings and workshops, it makes it safer for participants. It helps so much for them to be able to see that there are people who look like them on the leadership teams or facilitation teams of these events. I've had other experiences where that hasn't been the case, and people do not feel safe to open up about those aspects of their experience. So I'm really grateful whenever anyone does feel safe enough to begin to open up about that. And as I said, they do it cautiously, and they monitor very carefully what the response is. Personally, I acknowledge and validate that response and applaud their courage when they do begin to open up about that. So I hope that answers or begins to answer some of your questions, Sabra. And please feel free to correspond with me directly by email about this. If you'd like, Maria can give you my email address, I'm sure. And Maria, thank you for putting up some of the stuff in the chat panel about the various resources I've been naming. I will still send you the links and resources and so on.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. So yeah, it's same with Sheri too. If you have a link where people can contact you as well, I don't know if it's on the Maria. Do we have something like that already? Okay, there we go. So I have to thank you both for being here today. Unless Maria, you want to add anything else, or?
Thank you, Stuart, for co-hosting this session with our wonderful panelists, Rob Hawkings and Sherri Jackson. Thank you, everyone who's in the attendees here live with us, for all your wonderful comments and questions. So much learning has taken place. So much learning has taken place. I'm speaking that from my own personal perspective, starting off with Sherri's meaningful statement, breaking through the denial. Right, that for me, and I know it was part of right on the opening, but it's just really stuck with me, and the fallacies that we tell ourselves, and the things that we experience. I really resonated with that, because I struggle with that, right? And I thank you both for your vulnerability and sharing your honest and authentic selves, because that in itself is another connection that we can make with our clients when they see that we are not there to fix, we are there to be with and listen authentically, and we're authentically resonating with their frequency. It's so powerful, the transformation that takes place both for the client and of course the therapist. And we get to talk about our personal transformation, our supervision session. So I'm really glad that Rob's out there supervising students who are just entering the field. What a phenomenal experience for them, and likewise for Sheri. Thank you, everyone that's been here. I'm going to turn it back to Stuart for final comments. And yes, contact information for Sheri and Rob is in that link, gatehouse.org. And for anyone who's joining us from Facebook, if you go to the gatehouse.org and click on resources, counseling, you'll have their contact information there as well. Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Yeah, so again, thank you, Sheri and Rob. It's been an absolute honor to have you both here today. People listening and people listening in the future will get some great insight to what you've given us today. And one thing I really insist is that in the coming, well, I'll say coming months, but in the near future. I would love to get together with either with you both or individually at some point. Now that we can actually get together and people again, as people again, I think that's the way it's going to work. It's something new we're going to have to learn all over again. Oh my God, a person there. I get to talk to that person. I actually get to sit beside them. But I would love to get together with you in the near future. And I really would love to collaborate more with you, Rob, but with you doing in the outreach communities, because I'm kind of doing the same thing with my support, what I'm doing. And I would, you know, I probably have questions for you, even what I'm doing now at the Gatehouse myself, moving further. So, but anyway, I'll leave it at that. And I want to thank you both. Maria, thank you for making this all happen today, actually through the whole week. And again, it was so nice to see you both. Thank you. And thank you for everybody who are listening today.